Reaching a town or a city in a Pokemon game has always given me a sense of relief. No more trainer after trainer, no more random wild Pokemon encounters, and finally a place to heal. And while most of these reasons have disappeared with recent Pokemon games, the feeling when I approach a settlement hasn't. Compared to routes, leaving a good impression is much easier for a town or a city. You can fly to them, meaning you can frequently visit them, and they usually have clear features that make them stand out, while routes are prone to blending together. And yet, not all cities are equal. Some just aren't very good. And those are exactly the ones I want to talk about today. The worst city or town in every Pokemon region. It shouldn't surprise you that we're starting in Kanto, but this is immediately an incredibly difficult one. This batch contains some of the most iconic cities in series history, and almost all of them have strong, unique features that make them memorable. Pewter City has the museum, Cinnabar Island has the Pokemon Mansion, Fuchsia City has the Safari Zone, etc. Only 2 locations don't have a gym, but those are Pallet Town, which feels very harsh to call the worst, considering that's where it all started, and Lavender Town, and I mean, come on. No way that's the worst place in Kanto. If we don't consider Indigo Plateau a town, which we shouldn't, because it isn't, then I'd say the worst Kanto has to offer is Viridian City. It's a very simple location, without any features beyond the gym. Your first time passing through, its selling point is that it's the first bigger city you ever come across, but that novelty fades fast. From then on, it takes until the end of the game for Viridian City to be worth visiting again. And while the Giovanni as gym leader twist is really cool, having a gym as your only reason to visit also means that there's no reason to ever come back here in the post-game. It feels weird to say about a location as iconic as Viridian City, but looking at the facts, I can't do anything else but consider it the worst in Kanto. When we come to Johto, each town and city really has its own charm. But especially early in your adventure, there are a couple places that are not worth revisiting. New Bark Town is one of them, but I definitely don't want to be too harsh on starting towns in this video, since they fulfill their function pretty well in most games. Cherry Grove City is definitely playing with fire, but I actually think there's one place that may technically have more to offer, but is a lot more disappointing due to where in your adventure you come across it. And that is Mahogany Town, the town containing the second to last gym. No small feat, and yet only has 3 more buildings. One is the Poke Center, and another is definitely just a normal souvenir shop. Nothing strange about it whatsoever. When looking at this town, I can't help but feel its complete lack of interesting locales or design is the result of the detownification of the Lake of Rage. But these exact same buildings surround the lake and you have one of Johto's most memorable towns, but the final product feels undercooked. As we get to Generation 3 and the Hoenn region, charm and vibe are more and more gonna play a role. By now, Game Freak have figured out how to give each location its own identity, and it will only happen more as the years go by. That means that Hoenn still has a few places where not a whole lot is going on, like Battleburg City, which at least has a cool gym and design, and Verdanturf City, which may be themed to be a peaceful town with clean air, but that theme isn't exactly pronounced. Hoenn also has the worst excuse for a city we've ever seen, an Evergrande City. They can call it a city all they want, this isn't one, I'm not counting it. Which means the questionable title of World Settlement has to go to Oldale Town. I've tried to be lenient for early towns and cities in this video, but I can't excuse Oldale Town. There is literally nothing of interest here. It's Viridian City without a gym, Little Root Town without Professor Birch's lab. You have 0 reason to ever revisit this town after the first time, and that cannot be overlooked. Fortunately, Sinnoh heavily improves on the quality of these early game towns. Despite not having gyms, Twin Leaf Town gets the starter town boost, Sanjin Town is frequently visited, and Jubilife City is extremely memorable. Sinnoh has some other small towns with not too much going on, like Floaroma, Salacian and Celestic Town, but the vibes in these towns are off the charts, so calling them the worst definitely doesn't feel fair. So I went for a Mahogany situation, a late game location that doesn't feel as epic as cities that came before. Sunny Shore City is not as bad as Mahogany Town, but it definitely isn't as memorable as cities that came before. The roads being elevated does make it stand out, but where they lead to is underwhelming. There is a marketplace for seals, which is not something I feel many people dived into, and while the lighthouse is a nice landmark, it pales compared to what we had previously seen in Olivine City. So yeah, Sunyshore City is easily the best city in this video so far, but I do feel it's the worst in Sinnoh. Just like Sinnoh, Unova has a lot of small towns and cities without significant places of interest, but the designs of these locations are impeccable across the board. So many of these towns are memorable because of their unique themes and architecture, to the point where you may forget their name after years of not visiting, but not their design. I'm talking Accumula Town, Lacunosa Town, Flockacy Town, that kind of work. However, Unova has two major outliers we must discuss though. The first is Black City. Is this a city? If so, it is easily the worst. It's all trainers, nothing else, with deep mechanics I don't have time to dive into right now, but let's just say that it doesn't work as well as you'd hope. But I don't think seeing Black City as a true city is correct. This was never designed to be compared to, say, Castelia or Mistralton City. It was designed to be compared to White Forest and previous battle facilities. So, for me, it's out of the running, leaving the true worst city, Anvil Town. Don't get me wrong, I like that this exists. Optional places like this is the stuff I love. But there is very little to do when you're actually here. It says enough that you can't fly to Anvil Town, or that there aren't any real facilities here. There is a little side quest and some items to get, but nothing unique enough to run with the big dogs this region is filled with. Compared to Unova, I feel Kalos definitely is a tad worse when it comes to towns and cities. You can see the ideas are there to give each place its own identity, and the heavy French influence also helps, but the early 3D graphics definitely feel weaker than the perfected sprite work of Gen 5. Now, we cannot discuss Kalos city quality without bringing up Lumio City. Probably the most divisive city in series history. I have seen several people over the years absolutely hate this place, and they probably would consider it the worst city in the region. While I do understand the criticism, I definitely agree Game Freak at this stage wasn't ready to tackle such a massive city in their first 3D outing. I don't think it's bad either. There's so much to do and it's such a recognizable location with a ton of charm that I could never call it the worst in Kalos. One that comes a lot closer is Geosench Town. While this is an incredibly plot-relevant town, and so probably not the worst based entirely on that, we do have to acknowledge how absolutely ruined this place is in the post-game. The mess the ultimate weapon created is never cleaned up, such as a giant crater that stays in the center and several houses that remain forever flipped. It's almost like Game Freak thought we just put the game aside after the leak and would never bother returning here. It's very strange to think about. But, again, at least Geosench is important to the story of X and Y. The same cannot be said for the pathetic excuse of a location that is Aqua Core Town. This is easily one of the worst settlements in Pokemon history. Not only is there absolutely nothing here, revisiting it might honestly be detrimental to you. Say you're shiny hunting in Centaloon Forest and in need of Pokeballs or the box. Well, tough luck. Aqua Core doesn't have a Poke Center, so no box. And the mart only sells basic potions and Pokeballs for the entirety of the game. They never upgrade like other places do. It's a bizarre decision that makes Aqua Core Town one of the only places in this entire video you will actively be avoiding. Fortunately, Alola heavily improved on town and city design compared to Kalos. The layout is not always as amazing as in the sprite-based games, but the vibes and themes are amazing as ever here, and each place truly has its own little thing going on. You won't find a better example of how powerful vibes can be as in Alola, as for example Po Town should be dead last based purely on what this place has to offer, basically nothing. But this is such a memorable part of the game that leaves such a great impression that calling Po Town the worst place in the game doesn't feel right at all. So I started to look at the actual towns and cities of the game and must conclude that Paniyola Town doesn't weigh up. The western theme is nice and all, but it's all style over substance. While that is a problem that Alola in general suffers from, there's no place where it's as pronounced as Paniyola Town. Now, that also has something to do with the fact the town was created with Paniyola Ranch in mind, which does offer a lot, but since it isn't within the town borders, I don't count it. And what's actually within the borders is as good as nothing, meaning Paniyola Town finishes at the bottom of the region. Galar's towns and cities are often criticized for their simple designs, and while that is definitely a fair criticism, I still think the overall quality is pretty high. They are simple but pleasing to the eye, with vibrant colors, their own individual identity and a lot of well-used inspiration from real-life Britain. However, one town pushes the simple design a tad too far, and I think we all know which one it is. Spikemuth is an insult to all Pokemon cities, and frankly gives the entirety of Galar a bad name. This entire place is a hallway laid out in a bizarre 2D fashion, almost like a platformer, and while that is bad enough as is, it becomes even worse when you consider the game actually teases the fact there is more to it, you just can't access it. I don't think I need to waste any more words on it. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who has played Sword and Shield and has positive words to say about Spikemuth. And that same sentiment without a doubt applies to, well, the entirety of Paldea as well. Within this video we have clearly established there are two things that make a town good. Either you have substance or you have style. With the exception of Mesagosa, this applies to not a single city in Paldea. Most of them you barely have any reason to revisit and the layouts are dire as well. But there is of course still a gap in quality to be found. Cascarrafa is not exactly packed with content or the most beautiful city we've ever visited, but at least its multi-tiered design is something to remember it by. Zapapico is a complete nothing burger of a town, consisting of a few random houses you can't do anything with in the middle of nowhere, and yet it's still not the worst one. Because at least at the point in the game you'll find it, you know not to expect too much. Los Platos on the other hand is a rude awakening right at the start of the game, at the point where you're still excited to explore Paldea's first town, and find it's completely devoid of anything worth visiting. Never before has a town felt so useless, and let's hope it will hold that questionable title for generations to come. And that's all my picks. And I'm super curious to hear what you consider to be the worst cities in Pokemon. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed my takes, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.